Today we're going to be mixing together Arctic Fox in the colors Ritual and Wrath. So you probably see that my swatches are labeled 1 through 12. I do just want to say that's not supposed to be synonymous with hair levels. The numbers just help us keep track of each swatch throughout the video. My number 1 swatch is green, 2 is a dyed gray, 3 is a medium natural red, 4 is black, and then 4 to 11 is the range that goes to platinum blonde, with number 12 being a toned version of number 11. So with my mix videos, I like to do at least 2 separate ratios on the top and the bottom so we can see the range that we can get with our mix. And if you were curious, I did just want to show the differences. So this is Ritual and this is Wrath. You can already see just by looking at those two how well they're going to mix together. But the Wrath is super bright compared to the Ritual, so I'm excited to see the cool deep red that we can get from this. And I know most people like to see equal parts, so we're gonna start with that on the very top of the swatches. Please keep in mind everyone's hair is different, which means everyone's hair can take color differently, plus different screens and monitors can make colors look different, specifically undertones. So please just use my video as a reference for how this could possibly maybe turn out for you. So for our second ratio, because the equal parts turned out so dark, I did want to try a slightly lighter version. So we're going to do a 3-to-1 ratio. So that will be 1 part of the Ritual again with 3 parts of Wrath. Because of how deep the Ritual is in comparison to the Wrath, it does seem to take the mix over a little bit, but hopefully adding this much more Wrath helps to kind of deepen it a little bit, but not as much as the equal parts. I'm just afraid that it's not going to look that different, but I'm hopeful that there's a difference. I didn't want to go too far with adding too much Wrath. Alright, I'm going to let these sit for an hour. I will then rinse them out, and when they are dry, I will meet you back here and we can do some comparisons. Even though we have both top and bottom as their own ratios, overall I would describe this as a very, very cool undertoned deep red, maybe like a wine or a berry, which makes sense because both Ritual and Wrath are cooler in undertone. I would consider Wrath to be a very saturated color, whereas Ritual is a little bit less. I wouldn't say it's a muted color, but it kind of leans in that direction. So together they make a color that is close to being really saturated, but just a little bit soft. Like there's just a touch of softness with this mix. I will say, with colors like this, I discovered this with Lunar Tides Cran Baby. They often will look a little bit more red the first time that you do your hair with them, and then as you wash them, they're gonna get more and more cool toned usually. Red has a harder time sticking to the hair. Maybe you have hair that holds on to red a little bit better, but overall, this is probably the most red your hair will look if you do this mix, at least with my ratios. So if you want it even more red than this, I would definitely recommend adding more more wrath, but then you lose a little bit of that depth, especially as it fades. And 11 turned out quite light. I think if you have a little bit more porous hair, it actually probably would still be darker because both 10 and 12 are relatively dark. I think honestly the 11 swatch probably has a lot of synthetic hair mixed in, and I think that's probably why it turned out lighter, which if you have not very porous hair, this could be a good representation of how it could turn out for you. The plus side to this being a little bit lighter is it helps us to see the undertones a little bit better. But if you're looking for something like this and you have porous hair, you're probably going to want to dilute this mix to get it to be a little bit more pinky, because I think on a lot of people's hair it'll probably turn out closer to 10, even on number 11, because it's a very pigmented mix. For example, the green swatch, which was our number 1, is completely covered. I see no green on that. But because red and green are across from each other on the color wheel, they tend to kind of neutralize each other a little bit at times. So I don't see a ton of red or maybe even just like saturation in general coming through on the 1, especially compared to the lighter swatches. It is there, it just looks maybe a little bit more natural than like 10, 11, and 12. And because this is a little bit more pigmented, I think if you have medium brown hair, this could work well for you. I actually do see a difference on my dark brown swatch as well, but I see more of a difference on the bottom. I think the Wrath is a little bit more pigmented than Ritual, so using something like that I think will get you a better result than the Ritual. I mentioned earlier that the Ritual is a little bit softer and that tends to make it less pigmented, but always do a strand test so you make sure you're getting the results that you want. So very quickly, I did just want to look at the Ritual compared to this mix because I think especially on number 11, it does look kind of similar. I will note that Ritual came out pretty early on in my channel, so swatch numbers are a little bit funky, and I did actually do 2 separate diluted parts, but that doesn't matter at the moment. So one thing I find interesting about mixing colors together like this is how much it can change. So overall, Ritual is meant to be a slightly deeper color, but again, because of that softness, I think it loses a little bit of its pigment. But adding in the Wrath suddenly makes it very dark, and I personally hypothesize it's because of just how pigmented the Wrath is. It kind of like helps push the Ritual along. I don't know if that makes any sense. That could be completely illogical, but I find it really interesting that my Ritual swatches turned out so light in compared to this mix, especially knowing that Wrath itself is not that dark either. So if you did try Ritual and maybe it turned out lighter for you than you expected it to, honestly, adding just a little bit of Wrath or any red that you might have could definitely help, I think. And if you're wondering, I do see a little bit of red in the top mix. It's actually not too far off looking at the 11, but it is there. I do see it. As for comparisons, we are going to start with Adore in the color Wild Cherry. So this is comparable to number 12, comparable to number 11, number 10, and comparable to number 9. So I decided to move the swatches down so that you can see it next to both ratios because I feel like the Wild Cherry is sort of the perfect in-between. It holds that same depth that you get with the equal parts ratio, but it stays a little bit more red like the bottom ratio. And I mean, I guess on like number 10, it doesn't look too far off. I do think the bottom ratio does look a little bit more cool in comparison, but only a touch. Overall, the Wild Cherry is still a very cool undertone deep red. And again, the Wild Cherry on the Platinum Blonde hair, I think is pretty similar to how the mixes could look on your hair, the Platinum Blonde, if you have more porous hair. Sometimes my Platinum Blonde swatches turn out considerably lighter in comparison to my other swatches, and I do find it kind of weird, but I'm glad I do have a visual to show you what to possibly expect from this mix. And then I do have one other very cool undertone deeper red I can compare this to, and that is going to be Good Dayang in the color All in This Together. This is comparable to number 12, 11, 10, and comparable to number 9. I think the biggest difference for this color is that it actually turned out a bit darker than the top. Not by a lot, but I definitely feel like the All in This Together is much closer to almost looking black in comparison to the Arctic Fox mix that we did. I might be crazy, but I feel like I see just a touch more red in the Good Die Young as well, but it's so hard to tell that. I might be seeing things. But I do feel like even the diluted section looks a little bit more red compared to the Adore. Not that we're going to compare the diluted section to the bottom, but it does help us see the undertones a little bit. I do think the All in This Together is maybe a touch more cool compared to the bottom mix. I see a little bit more red in our bottom mix, but obviously if we're looking at the direct dye portion, it is, oh my goodness, it is way darker. So it's all preference. Now, I did mention earlier Lunar Tides in the color Cran Baby. I would say that one looks more like Ritual by itself versus mixed with this. That one did turn out a lot more red as well when I first did it. I did do a video of me washing it. I don't remember how many times I washed it, like probably at least 100 times. And just on the first wash, it went way more cool toned as well, which is why I have the experience to know that this will probably wash out, even just the first time, much more cool than how it turns out right away. So keep that in mind if you are looking for a more red color. But now I'd like to look at the before and after clips. Those, as well as anything past this point in the video, will all be done in natural lighting. I hope my video helped. If you have a request, I do have a link below to a Google form you can fill out. Just remember, I only do brands that do not test on animals. Thank you so very, very much to my patrons, and thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.